welcome back to another episode of the Recession Resistant Real Estate Radio. I'm your host, Brandon Cobb, and today I've got Dave Morgia on the show. Dave is the principal of the David and Travis Capital Group. They were formed in 2021. They have put over $47 million of multifamily real estate ownership in North Carolina and Florida since then. That is quite the run up. Dave has a background in asset management and commercial power utilities. He used that to qualify deal flow and manage the assets. Dave is also the host of the Making Money in Multifamily Real Estate Show. It's a weekly podcast focusing on multifamily investing. Dave, welcome to the show.
Brandon, thank you for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Hey, excited to have you on today. We're going to dive into some multifamily stuff today. But before we jump into some of the good stuff we've got planned, tell everyone, what are you focused on today? What do you do? And then tell us the backstory about how you got into this.
Sure. So today, me and my partner, Travis, writing the name right, David and Travis Capital Group, we're pretty niche down, and we kind of mentioned it before the show. But right now, at least as it stands, we focus on multifamily acquisitions, specifically in Orlando. So we have two deals under our belt, but really the second deal that we closed, Orlando, that we just recently did, 186 units. We look to buy in Orlando. We like the market. We understand the market. And I think what we've learned over, the couple of years in the real estate space is if you niche down, you can find success way faster. So that's kind of our thesis there. Bringing it back to my background, like you mentioned in the intro, I have a background in asset management and power utilities. So kind of have that engineering background. I'm pretty good with numbers, pretty good with business plans. So I kind of handle that side of the business. I met my partner, Travis, once I moved down to New York City, where we're operating out of. And that kind of brings us up to today. So
commercial power utilities. I love the cross-pollination from different industries. It seems that everyone who gets into real estate almost always did not start in real estate. Either
every
came
time
from a corporate role or came from something else. Talk about some of the skills that you took from your background in commercial power utilities, and how did that set you up for success in the real estate world?
Yeah, so I think there's like a couple things. Really, it's kind of my affinity for putting a business plan together, figuring out how to operate something, right? So my day to day, the W-2 is trying to run a power plant. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of pumps, a lot of everything, really. So when I look at multi or real estate, it's kind of exciting because it's almost simpler in a weird way. It's different, but it's it's a similar business plan. So you can kind of learn to put deals together and figure out what it's going to cost to do things, what you actually want to do, and put scopes together, all those types of things. The other piece of it is I have that engineering background, always affinity for numbers, and Excel nerd a little bit, if you will. So I head up the underwriting for our team, and that's been a big help as well.
Yeah, that's huge, especially when you can go into a big project like this and know how to tackle it and have some kind of background. Otherwise, it's just overwhelming. And if the old saying is, if you don't, if you fail to plan, or plan to fail, you fail to plan. I might have switched that up backwards, but couldn't be more true. So I know a lot of people, underwriting is a huge thing in multifamily. It's very different than the residential world. It can be quite complex. When you were just getting started, how did you go about tackling the understanding of multifamily? And then how does that underwriting look to you today? Kind of maybe walk us through your process at a high level. I know we could probably talk for hours on this subject.
I've done whole podcasts on my show, several. So yeah, we don't have to dive in that deep, but generally my start was, like I mentioned, always kind of was in Excel, enjoyed numbers in that sense. So I was binging podcasts, trying to figure out what all these terms meant, what all the, assumptions were for these types of deals. So I started there. And at the same time, I actually had bought a textbook. It's on my shelf somewhere, but I decided to just kind of build out my own model. And it wasn't even just to have my own special model, but just to understand where the numbers come from, how does the arithmetic work, those types of things. So those two things kind of together, just really kind of learning the language and figuring out how the numbers play together were the two biggest things. It takes a lot of reps to feel comfortable. Anybody can kind of slap numbers on it, but to know that the numbers are good and you feel confident to put some money on the line, it takes a lot of reps. So you just got to keep going at it, is my advice there.
Now, when it comes to underwriting, do you have a formula or a model that you use at a very high level to kind of filter out the deals that are not going to work right off the bat? And then if they pass that litmus test, a more detailed approach that you then dive into?
Yeah, so our workflow generally starts with my partner Travis. He handles like the broker relationship, so he handles the deal flow. He kind of does that qualitative check, like you're mentioning. What it boils down to a lot is, so we niche down in Orlando. We are very precise in knowing in the submarkets what we can get for rents. We know what we can hit based on a certain finish of the product, that type of thing. So if we think there's a huge, delta on a deal, or in general, if it's just a good buy, we kind of aim to almost hit that 1% rule really in like a roundabout way. It's kind of the same thing as you'd see in single or smaller multi. It's not always that simple. So there is some kind of more napkin math that goes into it with kind of like the all-in cost. But as a general litmus test, if it's like kind of getting close to 1%, yeah, I'll probably just start to look at it a little more heavily. You could probably imagine in Orlando, there's a lot of deals that probably don't even come close to that. So it's pretty easy to know right off the bat that if it's not really a winner. But if it's kind of coming close to, that check and a couple other small ones, essentially after that, I have to go in a deep dive, and it's a few hours in spreadsheets just to kind of see the whole business plan in full. So.
Okay, so 1% rule, meaning the rents need to be at least 1% of what the value of the asset is. Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, so great, easy way at a high level to see if this is something you should dive into. Now, without leaving no stone unturned here, what are some of the most important variables that you're looking at if it passes that litmus test, and now you're doing a deep dive into it?
Sure. So I always tout that the two biggest levers as far as, is a deal going to be risky or not, because everything is an assumption, right? So if you're assuming things, the two biggest assumptions that can really fall by the wayside are, what are your rents? What are you going to be able to achieve? Are you being way too overzealous with your rents? That's a huge red flag. And the other one, because multi is usually a game of refinancing or selling in like say 5 years, is what is your cap rate when you're exiting this deal on the refinance or the sale? So if you're aggressive on either of those two things, those to me are the two biggest levers that can really, anybody could put, some kind of rosy numbers on it and make a deal look good. But if you kind of look closer and actually, tweak them down a little bit, you'll see it's not that great a deal. So those are the ones I really look closely at.
Yeah, it was amazing, earlier on, this year and last year, how many people were just underwriting crazy rate increases based on like inflation. Like they had no downside built into the underwriting whatsoever. I mean, it was amazing. How has y'all's strategy pivoted since we've had this crazy run up in interest rates this year?
Yeah, so a big thing for us with the interest rates, I think, we closed the deal. So let's, I guess, first talk about that deal is really we had to assume the worst, and we had heard a lot about what the Fed was going to do the next year and a half, 2 years. So we had baked in a lot of those interest rate hikes as like the worst case scenario in the deal. So that was like step one, was like, we know it's going to trend this way. So we baked in the interest rate on the loan. We baked in the cap rate that we would see as a result of that. So all that was really already in there as the worst case, because we can't in good conscience, like go to investors, say like, hey, we probably think it'll be okay, but we'll see. No, we went like worst case, like here's what's going to happen if like all of the boxes get checked and the Fed's coming at us real hard. So we did that right off the bat. The second thing, going back to rents, my other lever there is we have a hot market in Orlando right now. It's still, I think, it changes monthly, but it's one of the top 5 markets for rent growth, continues to do so. But we don't really bake any of that in as far as the year 1, year 2 projections. What we'll do is we will project the value add, but we won't bake in that kind of market capture of just that extra rent growth that you're seeing as a result of the market. So we only project what we think we're going to get for the current market for what we turn for a unit today, basically, if that's making sense.
Yeah. Now, are you focused mainly on value add then?
Yeah, that'd be correct. There's maybe a deal that we could buy at a good cost basis with some small improvements, but generally we like value add. It's usually putting maybe say 6 to 10,000 per unit in the property and some common area stuff like that. So nothing too fancy.
Yeah, so you can force appreciate the value of the
Exactly.
asset that helps you control it. What are some of those variables? What does that look like? You said you're underwriting for, worst case scenario. A big topic everybody is talking about right now is, oh my God, we're in a recession. It's going to get worse. This one's going to be bad. It seems like the news is terrible right now. What are some of those variables that you're underwriting at a worst case scenario? I know interest rates are one of them. Like what are you putting into your pro formas for interest rates? What are you putting into your pro formas for rents? Are you factoring in a downside? Are you factoring in an increase in interest rates? If so, like how much?
Yeah, so we have a lot of people will say stay away from bridge debt, but the market that it stands right now is actually kind of conducive for bridge debt because it's hard to get a loan that's going to make a property cash flow. So we are okay with bridge debt, but there's a huge asterisk with that, and I kind of mentioned it already, but we had to make sure that our cap on the bridge existed. So first off, we bought like a cap on the bridge debt because we don't want this interest rate to just keep going up and up and up, which could happen with the variable debt that bridges. So we locked in that cap, and then we used that highest possible interest rate. It essentially is like our fixed rate in the underwriting. So we knew like going in, like, oh, at worst, it's going to be at this fixed rate at the very end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Jerome Powell does all his hikes that he said he was going to do. We're going to hit this no matter what. We assumed that. So we put that in as essentially almost like a fixed debt scenario, and it still pencils. So, you know, we can go in feeling good that the interest rate is not going to affect us anymore. So we've kind of already hit it, honestly, with all the hikes. We've already kind of hit our cap, and we're going to see 3 more, and it's not really going to affect us anymore. So it's nice to know that we already have assumed the worst, and it's still going to cash flow day one. So
yeah, so you guys got a game plan, and then the next step after you've got something that pencils out, you've done your deep dive on it. At this next step, it's now time to raise the money for the deal. Talk to us a little bit, like, what lead generation strategies are you using? What do those conversations now look like? How have the conversations changed with potential investors from, you know, a year ago to today?
yeah, those are 2 very different questions. So the lead gen has always it starts with kind of your personal, just your circle of influence, right? The friends and family and the professional connections you have.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of relatively straightforward. I don't think there's much to speak on there. But the second circle to me is like, how can you expand that network? Based on the people you already know, or even if it's just cold outreach to try to figure out who would be interested in what you're working on. So we kind of do a few channels to get more people in our door, if you will. Like you mentioned, I have a podcast that helps with some awareness to what we have going on. Travis and I host a meetup in New York City. So those are a couple funnels that will pretty much kind of take the data and help follow through and do some follow-ups and see kind of what investor pulses do too. Another interesting one I'll do is I'm not super active on LinkedIn as far as posting goes, but there's a lot in the background going on through kind of message outreach to see who in professional fields adjacent to real estate, not necessarily like active in real estate, but professionals who are looking to park some money and make a return, to see what their pulse or interest is on something like that. So all of those kind of funnels come together, making sure we're following up consistently. That's like a big thing. You want to make sure like people feel heard, or at least like you want them to know that you're thinking of them, right? You want to make sure that they're feeling taken care of is the biggest thing for investors, in my opinion. So all of that kind of boils down to our investor outreach strategy.
So you've got the podcast that you're using, the Making Money in Multifamily Real Estate show. It sounds like posting on social media, and you've got some automations going on in the background on LinkedIn specifically. Those 2 things. Is there anything else that you're using for lead gen besides your existing, friends and family network?
Yeah, like I mentioned, the meetup is a cool one. That one doesn't even yield the highest like turnout for us, but we kind of spoke on it before we hit record. Like, it's always nice to meet in person, right? So
yeah,
I don't know, we have fun with that, man. Like we have anywhere from like a dozen to 30, 40 people depending on the month and the timing of it all. But we meet out of right in the middle of the city where everyone can kind of hang out and listen up. It's actually out of the CoStar office here in New York. So we kind of partner with CoStar to get this together. So that's pretty cool. And we just have a good time. It's just nice to talk shop in person. So it might not be the highest yield for us, but we get like better quality. So it maybe is in a weird way the highest yield as far as our time goes. But yeah, that's another fun one for us.
Making connections, automation on social media, chasing the eyeballs, creating the platform, all great ways to do lead generation. Now, talk to us about this deal that you just closed in December. It seems like everybody's complaining that they can't find deals, no deals pencil out. Everybody's sitting on the sidelines, waiting to see what the market's going to do, waiting to see what interest rates are going to do. Why did you guys choose to move forward with this deal? And what was so attractive about it that made y'all continue to close it in the midst of all these interest rate hikes?
Yeah, so I guess I'll go. So this was a long one in the works. So this just closed a couple weeks ago, like right before Christmas time. But really, we started penciling this deal in, I want to say mid-July. It was like right around 4th of July time, actually. And I think that kind of played a part. So Travis and I's thesis is always kind of it's better to do no deal than a bad deal approach. So
Mhm.
maybe we would have closed one in Orlando before this one, but we'd rather just not miss. So that's kind of our approach. So this one's been a little bit long time coming, really. But what we liked about this deal was really the timing of it,
Mhm.
the relationship that we had with the seller, and the partnership that we kind of put together to get this done. So I guess I'll kind of go through this in order. But the timing of it, like I mentioned, it was July. We had just seen our first kind of couple rate hikes, if you're kind of rewinding time and remembering what the Fed has been doing. So those two things combined, I think if you were to talk to a lot of brokers at the time, there were some deals out there, not just ours, that were not seeing a ton of offers. So I think that played well for us. By the end of the deal, we had gotten to best and final, and there was only 3 offers. And we, in talking to the seller, really kind of realized there was only 2 like legitimate offers. So it was really
Mhm.
us versus another team. So normally, even just 6 months ago, we would have probably been going against like 6 or 8 good offers. So I think the market timing was like pretty nice there in that aspect. As far as the seller, like I mentioned, talking about like outreach and podcasts, I had the seller on my show, on my
Mhm.
podcast. So when we were, starting to look up this deal, I see the owner of the property, and I go, "Hey, I know the owner of that group. It's so and so," and I won't mention names, but it was just a really cool connection to see that, and then B, it just helped immensely to kind of get to best and final and talk a little more candidly through the deal, and really opened up a lot of doors in that respect. And the last one was our partnership, which was a big one for us. So we're still young in the game and looking to close and lead a lot of these deals, but realistically, we don't have the balance sheet for a deal this big. We don't have necessarily the experience to manage a property this big. So we got a good partnership together, which we've also been, doing some lead gen on, trying to grow relationships with. So we have a good partnership team that's leading this deal with us. And they were obviously super excited about it as well. So if we want, we can get into numbers a little bit more, but generally, you know, we write conservatively, and once we kind of hit that box, we start to look qualitatively. I'm like, all right, why does this deal make sense, instead of what do the numbers look like? So that's kind
Mhm.
of the takeaways there.
Talk to us about that partnership, because I think the biggest mistake a lot of people make is if you're an investor and you're passively investing in a deal, especially, is you fail to do your due diligence on the partners, especially in a lot of these real estate development syndications. Everyone's got this sponsor facing relationship,
Yep.
and they don't do any homework on the construction company, which is crazy in my opinion, because that is who's going to be able to decide whether or not this deal pencils out. Talk to a little bit about the synergies in the partnership. Like, why did you choose to partner with, make this specific partnership? How did you find them as well?
Yeah. So we, in the back of our minds, like we said, we always wanted to kind of go bigger, faster. So to do that, we logically said, like I mentioned, we're not going to be able to close this on our own. So we need like a good partner that we trust, that is basically 5 years, 10 years ahead of us, whatever you want to call it. So
Yeah.
we had always been basically slowly growing that list. And the list is short. It's like 3 teams that were like, oh, we would do a deal with you today, like at that size, at that type of deal. So there's like one of 3 teams that we would consider for a deal like this. We found this group specifically through a mastermind that I'm in. I'm in a mentorship mastermind group. They are actually have been in the group for a long time. So we gotten to know them over the years, in person, remotely, that type of thing. And we never really discussed like, oh, we want to do a deal together for sure. But it's one of those things that me and Travis in the back of our minds had them as a partner that we would do if a deal kind of started to make sense. So once me and Travis looked at the deal, we were like, next steps are to find the right team to put together. So we butted heads, or put our heads together rather, and pretty much decided on them. And there was maybe one other group we were looking at too, but really it came down to these guys, and they were just excited, luckily, to work with us as we were with them. So it worked out pretty well.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you had laid the foundation by joining these mastermind groups, being
Yep.
around like-minded people that were in similar industries, either on the same path as you, or like you just said, 5 to 10 years ahead of you. And it was a perfect fit when you realized what was lacking. You said, hey, we want to go further, faster. And to do that, we can't figure out how to do everything ourselves. We need a who to be able to take out this specific department of duties and responsibilities. What was it? Was it a property management company, or was it an acquisition company? Who was what was the branch that you were partnering with?
Sure. Yeah. So they're another, like syndication firm. They're based out of Sarasota. Like I said, we've known them for a while. So they're doing basically, they're fully integrated. They have their own PM company within their syndication group. They're
Nice.
doing the whole thing. So they are truly one of the teams that we see that we want to be in 5, 10 years, say. So That's another reason why we picked them, is because, you guys are checking all the box as far as you're doing exactly what we want to do in 5 years. So not only can we close this deal with you, but we get to learn from you too. Is like a win-win. So
Yeah. It was funny. I was at a local meetup here in Nashville not too long ago, and the topic of vertical integration came up, because our company is vertically integrated. We just don't like the idea of having to rely on somebody else because there's so many risks in what we do. But it was funny. I spoke for a brief period of time of talking about vertical integration and, when you need to add this piece and that to the business. And I think the last guy that went, he had the best advice. He goes, why not just partner with someone who's vertically integrated instead of having to go and figure out all that? And I was like, man, there's a lot of truth to that. I can't imagine if I could have just circumvented everything we built and just found the right person to partner with that vertical integration. Because again, it goes back to like who, not how. You can spend the years trying to figure it out like we have, or go and see who's already figured out and then partner with that person. So that's absolutely genius there. I hope a lot of people will take home what Dave just said about that. Look for the right partners that you can align yourself with, especially if they've been around longer than you and they've already gone down that path. Dave, this has been great stuff. How can people learn more about you, learn more about your company, or get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think the best way is really just email. But we have our website, davidtravis.com. I'm pretty much all over social. If you search David Morja anywhere, you'll find me. But my email is david@davidtravis.com. So if you email me, I'll reply, whether it's you just want to get on a call or pick my brain about something. I don't love the term pick the brain, but I'm happy to share my time with people as long as we can, kind of just talk about something fun or whatever. So yeah, by any means, reach out. Be happy to.
We'll make sure that gets posted in the show notes. Send them an email if you're interested in getting in touch and learning more about the deals they got down in Florida, more about what they do. Go to their website. I'm sure they've got some great information on there. Dave, this has been fun, man. I appreciate you coming on today.
Brandon, thanks for your time.
Hey, see you, man.